I'm Adeline, 32, and I thought I knew my family. Last month I crept downstairs in our old house for water, the floor creaking under my socks. The hallway was dark, the air thick with the musty scent of old wood. In the dim living room, I heard Dad's low voice to my brother Caleb. "Don't worry, we'll make your sister pay for it all." My stomach dropped, a cold knot forming. The chipped glass in my hand, Grandma's old keepsake, felt heavier, its edges sharp against my palm. Why me? What were they planning? My trust cracked that night like a window pane under pressure. I stood frozen, the moonlight slicing through the curtains, casting shadows that felt like secrets. Have you ever heard words that changed everything? Tell me where you're watching from. Hit like if you felt this sting, and subscribe to hear how I fought back. The morning after I overheard Dad and Caleb, my apartment felt too small, like it was closing in. Sunlight cut through the blinds, hitting a stack of unpaid bills and a faded photo of me and Caleb at a county fair, our faces sticky with cotton candy, his arms slung around my shoulders. I was 32, scraping by on a non-profit salary, yet they thought I could pay for whatever mess Caleb was in. My coffee went cold as I paced, replaying Dad's words, each one a needle in my skin. They stung like a slap, sharp and personal. I grabbed my phone and called Harper, my best friend since college, her number a lifeline. Her voice was groggy but sharp when she answered. "Adeline, you okay?" "It's barely 8. I spilled everything, my voice shaking, words tumbling over each other. I heard Dad tell Caleb they'd make me pay for something. I don't even know what. Why me, Harper? I've given them everything, my time, my savings, my trust. She paused, the silence heavy with her processing. That's messed up. You need to talk to Caleb. Get the truth straight from him. I sank onto my couch, staring at a crack in the ceiling, its jagged line like my thoughts. What if I misheard? What if I'm blowing this up in my head? You didn't mishear. That's not how you sound right now. Trust your gut, Adeline. You're not crazy. Her words steadied me, but my stomach churned a mix of dread and doubt. Confronting Caleb felt like betraying the kid who used to build forts with me in the backyard, our laughter echoing through summer nights. I found an old birthday card he'd written years ago, his sloppy handwriting promising to always have my back. I traced the ink, my throat tight, the paper worn at the edges. Had he changed? Or had I been blind all along? "I can't just call him," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know what they're planning first." Harper sighed, her tone gentle but firm. "Then snoop. But be careful. Families hide ugly stuff. My cousin pulled something similar, borrowing money and vanishing. I wish I'd acted sooner." Her story about her cousin who'd left her family scrambling stuck with me like a burr. I hung up my resolve, hardening, a quiet fire starting in my chest. I needed answers, not promises. I threw on a jacket, the zipper catching in my haste, and grabbed a bag of groceries as an excuse, cans of soup and a loaf of bread I knew Mom liked. I drove to Mom and Dad's house, the familiar oak in their yard looming as I parked, its branches bare against the gray sky, like fingers reaching for something lost. I knocked, my heart thudding, each beat loud in my ears. Mom opened the door, her smile thin, almost brittle. "Adeline, what a surprise. You didn't call." "Brought some stuff," I said, lifting the bag, my voice tighter than I meant. "Thought you might need it." She ushered me in, but her eyes darted away, avoiding mine. The house smelled of lemon cleaner, too sterile, like they were scrubbing away guilt. Dad was at the kitchen table, reading the paper, his glasses low on his nose. He glanced up, his face unreadable, a mask I couldn't crack. "Hey, kiddo. What's up? Just dropping by," I said, forcing a smile that felt like plastic. "Been a while." We made small talk, but my skin prickled, every word laced with tension. I excused myself to the bathroom, my steps deliberate, then slipped into Dad's study. My pulse raced as I scanned his desk, cluttered with receipts, a coffee mug I'd painted in high school, and a pen leaking ink. A leather notebook caught my eye, its cover worn but heavy with purpose. I flipped it open, my fingers trembling, the pages crinkling. Pages listed Caleb's debts, car payments, credit cards, even a bar tab from some dive downtown. My name was circled in red ink with numbers I couldn't make sense of, thousands sprawling like a spider's web. My breath caught sharp and shallow. They were pinning this on me. I snapped the notebook shut, my mind spinning the room, tilting slightly. This wasn't a mistake. They'd planned to use me like I was some ATM with no limit. I slipped back to the kitchen, my face burning, my smile gone. Mom was chopping carrots, her knife loud against the cutting board, each slice deliberate. "Everything okay?" she asked, not looking up, her hands moving too fast. "Yeah," I lied, my voice tight, barely holding together. "Just tired." I left quickly, the grocery bag feeling heavier than when I arrived, like it carried their expectations. Back in my car, I gripped the steering wheel, anger mixing with hurt, a storm brewing inside. The notebook was proof it wasn't enough. I needed to know how far they'd go. Caleb's face from that old fair photo flashed in my mind, his grin wide, but so did his name next to those debts, cold and calculated. I started the engine, my heart pounding, the sound drowning out the quiet street. This was only the beginning. Driving back to my apartment, my knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, the leather cool under my grip. The notebook's red ink burned in my mind. My name circled like a target in some cruel game. I was 32, barely keeping my head above water, and they thought I'd bail Caleb out. My phone buzzed. Harper texting to check in, but I couldn't answer, not yet. I needed to face Caleb to hear the truth from his lips. I pulled into a coffee shop parking lot, the neon sign flickering above its hum, faint but persistent. Inside, the air was thick with espresso and chatter, voices overlapping like static. I spotted an empty booth by the window, the glass smudged and slid in my hands, shaky as I texted Caleb. "Can we meet now?" he replied fast. "Sure. Here in 20. I ordered a latte, the barista's smile too bright for my mood, her apron stained with coffee grounds. The jukebox kicked on, playing some old rock song Caleb and I used to sing to back when we'd sneak into Dad's garage to mess with his tools. The air smelling of oil and dust. The memory twisted my gut, a knot of nostalgia and betrayal. I sipped my drink, the foam bitter on my tongue, and waited, my fingers tapping the table. When Caleb walked in, his leather jacket was scuffed, his grin too easy, like he hadn't a care. He slid into the booth, leaning back like he owned the place, his boots scuffing the floor. "Hey, sis. What's so urgent?" His voice was light, but his eyes darted, avoiding mine. I took a breath, steadying myself, my pulse loud in my ears. "Just checking in. How's life? You doing okay with money?" His grin faltered, a crack in his armor. "Why you asking? I'm fine. You sure I know things have been tight?" I kept my tone soft, but my pulse hammered, each beat a warning. He shrugged, picking at a napkin, tearing it into strips. "I got a new car, didn't I?" "Things are looking up." I leaned forward, my voice low. "Careful. A car. Caleb, you've been jobless for months. How'd you swing that?" His jaw tightened, and for a second, I saw something raw guilt, maybe flickering in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by defiance. "You've always had it easy, Adeline. Good job, nice place. Not everyone's got your luck." The words hit like a punch, stealing my breath. Luck, I'd clawed my way through college, worked nights to pay rent while he partied, leaving tabs unpaid. I gripped my mug, the heat grounding me, keeping me from snapping. "Luck, I work for everything. You know that." He scoffed, leaning back, his chair creaking. "Yeah, well, maybe you could share some of that work ethic. Help out your family." There it was, the jab I'd been dreading, sharp and deliberate. I swallowed hard, keeping my voice steady though it trembled inside. "Help out how?" "Like paying for your car. Your debts." His eyes narrowed, and he stood, chair scraping loud enough to turn heads. "You don't get it. You never did. Just drop it, okay?" He stormed out the door, swinging hard behind him. The jukebox switched to a slow ballad, the notes heavy in the air, wrapping around my racing thoughts. My chest ached, not just from his words, but from the truth behind them. He wasn't just dodging, he was entitled, like I owed him my life. I thought back to high school when I'd lied to cover his skipped classes only for him to charm his way into Mom's praise, her smile wide while I stood in the background. I'd been his shield, and he'd let me take the fall every time, never once looking back. I paid for my coffee and stepped outside, the November chill biting my skin sharp against my flushed cheeks. Harper's text lit up my phone. "You talked to him?" I typed back. "He's in on it. I'm done guessing." My fingers hovered. Then I added, "Meeting him was a mistake. The street was quiet, the air heavy with coming rain." Back home, I sank onto my couch, the silence loud pressing against me. Caleb's words echoed, but so did the notebook's numbers, cold and undeniable. This wasn't just about a car or a bad month. They were building something bigger, and I was their way out. I stared at a photo on my shelf, me, Caleb, and Mom at a picnic years ago, all smiles, the grass green under our feet. It felt like a lie now. My anger flared sharp and hot, a fire I couldn't douse. I wasn't letting them drag me down. Not anymore. Thanksgiving was supposed to be warm, but the air in Mom and Dad's dining room felt like frost, heavy with unspoken tension. I was 32, sitting across from Caleb, his smirk sharp, as he carved the turkey, the knife glinting under the chandelier. Mom passed the mashed potatoes, her eyes skittering past mine, her hands unsteady. Dad cleared his throat, his voice too loud, cutting through the clink of silverware. "Caleb's been having a rough patch," he said, folding his napkin with deliberate care. "Adeline, you're doing well. Maybe you could help him out." My fork froze midway to my mouth, the peas sliding off. The tablecloth one I'd embroidered for Mom's 50th. Its delicate threads, a labor of love, seemed to mock me with its careful stitches. I set my fork down, my pulse loud in my ears, a drumbeat of dread. "Help how?" My voice was steady, but my hands shook under the table, hidden from their eyes. Caleb leaned back his plate, untouched, his posture casual but calculated. "You know, sis. Pitch in. You've got that fancy job." Fancy, I worked at a non-profit, barely covering rent, my fridge stocked with cheap noodles. I glanced at Mom, hoping she'd speak up, defend me. She just stirred her gravy, her lips tight, her spoon scraping the bowl. "What's going on, Dad?" I asked, my tone sharper, cutting through the forced warmth. Dad's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. "He's got debts. Car cards. You could cover some. Family steps up." My stomach twisted, the notebook flashing in my mind. My name circled, their plan laid bare in red ink. "Why me?" I pressed, my voice rising despite myself. "Caleb's a grown man. Why isn't he stepping up?" Caleb snorted, tossing his napkin down, its edge frayed. "Always so perfect, huh? You're doing fine. What's a few grand to you? A few grand? I'd been eating ramen to save for a new laptop." My dreams deferred for their convenience. My chair scraped as I leaned forward, my voice tight. "I'm not a bank. Why is this on me?" Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses rattle, the wine sloshing. "Don't be selfish, Adeline. We've given you everything. You owe us." Owe them I'd spent years proving I was enough, working double shifts, skipping vacations to send them money. My throat burned, tears threatening, but held back. Aunt Clara, sitting quietly at the end, coughed softly, her presence a small anchor. "She's right to ask Tom," she said, her voice low but firm. "Caleb's not a kid anymore." Dad shot her a look, his jaw tight, but I latched onto her words, a lifeline in the storm. "Exactly," I said, my voice steadier now. "Why's it always me bailing him out?" Mom finally spoke, her voice thin, almost breaking. "Let's not fight. It's Thanksgiving." But it was too late. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in the air, thick with their expectations. Caleb smirked again, like he knew I'd cave his confidence a blade. I remembered the times I'd covered his rent, thinking it was temporary, my bank account dwindling while he bought new sneakers. Now I saw it, his entitlement, their expectation, a pattern woven into our family. My anger surged, hot and unfamiliar, a fire I didn't know I had. "I'm not selfish," I said, standing my chair loud against the floor. "I'm done being your fix." Dad's eyes narrowed, his voice cold. "Sit down, Adeline. We're not finished." But I was already grabbing my coat, my heart pounding, each beat a rebellion. Aunt Clara's gaze followed me, a mix of pity and pride. Her hands folded tightly. The front door clicked shut behind me. The cold November air hitting my face sharp and cleansing. I stood on the porch, my breath visible, feeling the weight of their words. They weren't just asking, they were demanding their plan, a noose around my neck. And I wasn't sure how much more I could take. I drove away from Mom and Dad's, the streetlights blurring through my windshield, their glow fractured by the mist on the glass. My hands trembled on the wheel. Dad's words, "You owe us," cutting deeper with every mile, each one a reminder of my place in their world. I was 32, and my family felt like strangers, their faces unfamiliar. At my nonprofit office the next day, the hum of printers and coffee chatter couldn't drown out my thoughts. I stared at my computer, a grant proposal half written, my focus shattered, the cursor blinking like an accusation. My cubicle, usually a refuge with its pinned-up postcards, felt like a trap too small for my anger. Then my email pinged, a sharp sound that made me flinch. A forwarded message from Dad to Caleb, meant to be private, but my name was in the subject line, bold and glaring. My heart sank as I clicked, my fingers cold. The email was blunt, clinical: Caleb's credit card debt, $20,000, and climbing needed to be handled. Dad wrote, "Adeline's got the means. We'll lean on her guilt. She'll pay." My breath caught sharp and painful like glass in my lungs. They weren't just asking, they'd been scheming, counting on my loyalty to bleed me dry. I scrolled further, seeing Caleb's reply. "She's soft. She'll do it." My chest tightened like I couldn't get enough air, the room spinning. Soft, I'd rebuilt my life from nothing, worked nights while they slept, and they saw me as a mark, a tool. I pushed my chair back, my hands clammy, the squeak of wheels loud in the quiet office. The space felt too bright, the walls too close, the fluorescent lights buzzing like my thoughts. Marcus, my coworker, glanced over his brow, furrowed his coffee mug, paused mid-sip. "You okay, Adeline? You look like you saw a ghost." I forced a smile, my voice hoarse, barely mine. "Just a rough morning." He nodded, hesitant, then leaned closer, his voice low. "My family drained me dry once. Parents, siblings, the whole mess. Sometimes you gotta walk away, Adeline. Save yourself." His words lingered heavy with truth, but I couldn't process them, not yet. I excused myself to the break room, splashing water on my face, the cold a shock against my skin. The mirror showed my tired eyes, the weight of it all etched in my skin lines I hadn't noticed before. I thought of the summer I gave Dad my college savings after his layoff, how he'd promised to repay me, his hand on my shoulder, his voice warm. He never did. I told myself it was love, a daughter's duty, but now it felt like theft, a betrayal dressed in gratitude. My phone rang. Mom. I almost ignored it, my thumb hovering, but I hit. Accept, my heart pounding. "Adeline," she said, her voice thick with tears, "you're tearing us apart. Why can't you just help Caleb? He's struggling." I gripped the sink, the porcelain cool, my voice low. "Struggling, Mom." I saw the email. "You and Dad planned this. You're using me." She gasped. Then her tone sharpened, a blade wrapped in sorrow. "Don't you dare talk like that. We're family. You're supposed to sacrifice." Sacrifice. My voice broke raw and jagged. "I've got nothing left to give." "You're selfish." She snapped, her words a whip. "Always were." The line went dead. I stood there, the fluorescent light buzzing above a relentless drone. Selfish. The word clawed at me, dragging up memories of Mom praising Caleb's half-hearted efforts, while dismissing my late nights studying my report cards tossed aside. I'd thought I was building a family, but I was just their safety net, a means to an end. My anger burned, but beneath it was a deeper hurt, raw and heavy, sinking into my bones. I returned to my desk, the email still open. Caleb's words. "She's soft." Mocking me like a taunt. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. I needed to know how far they'd gone, but the truth was closing in and I wasn't sure I could face it. The week after Thanksgiving, Dad called a family meeting at their house. I was 32, my nerves raw from Mom's accusations, and that email, each word a fresh wound. I almost didn't go my car keys heavy in my hand, but I needed to face them to see their eyes. The living room was too warm, the couch sagging under me, its faded fabric scratching my legs. Dad stood by the fireplace, arms crossed the mantel bare except for a dusty clock. Mom sat stiffly twisting a tissue, her nails bitten raw. Caleb sprawled in an armchair, scrolling his phone. His nonchalance a quiet insult. Aunt Clara was there too, her presence a small comfort, her hands folded like a shield. Dad started, his voice clipped businesslike. Adeline, we need to talk about Caleb's future. He's drowning in debt. You're stable. You can co-sign a loan for him. My mouth went dry, the air thick with expectation. Co-sign? I'd seen the notebook, the email. This wasn't help. It was a trap, a noose tightening. No, I said, my voice steady, despite my racing heart, each beat a protest. I'm not doing that. Dad's face reddened, his knuckles white. Your family. This is what family does. I shook my head, my hands clenching, nails digging into my palms. Family doesn't scheme behind my back. I know about your plan to make me pay. Mom gasped, her tissue shredding, but Dad stepped closer, his voice rising, filling the room. You ungrateful girl. We raised, you, gave you everything. And now you're too good to help your brother. Caleb looked up, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. Come on, Adeline. It's just a signature. You're fine. My chest burned, a fire spreading. Just a signature, I stood, my voice shaking raw with years of swallowed hurt. I'm not fine. I've been paying for your mistakes my whole life. I'm done. Dad exploded, his voice a roar. Enough. You think you're clean. We've been using your credit for years. Loans, cards, all in your name. You didn't notice, did you? The room spun, the air sucked out. My knees buckled and I gripped the couch, its fabric rough under my fingers. Loans in my name. I stared at him, his words a knife twisting deep. What are you saying? I whispered, my voice barely there. He didn't flinch, his eyes cold. You're responsible. Banks trust you. We needed that. Caleb's got no credit. You do. Aunt Clara stood, her voice sharp, cutting through the haze. Tom, you didn't. Tell me you didn't do that to her. Dad ignored her, his eyes locked on me, unyielding. You'll co-sign or we'll keep using it. Your choice. I couldn't breathe, my chest tight like a vice. My credit, my future stolen. I looked at Caleb, hoping for something, regret, a shred of guilt. He met my eyes, then shrugged, his indifference a final blow. You're the responsible one, Adeline. You can handle it. His words broke me, shattering something deep inside. Responsible, I'd been their pawn, and he knew. My vision blurred, anger and betrayal crashing like waves, relentless. Aunt Clara grabbed my arm, her face pale, her grip firm. Adeline, you don't have to do this. But Dad's glare, Mom's silence, Caleb's indifference, they were a wall closing in, suffocating. I yanked my arm free, my voice raw, trembling with rage. You've been stealing from me. How could you? No one answered. The silence was louder than their lies, heavy with their guilt. I stumbled toward the door, my heart shattering with every step, the floor creaking under me. They'd taken more than money. They'd taken my trust, my place in this family, everything I'd built. And I wasn't sure I'd ever get it back. Back in my apartment, the walls seemed to pulse with my heartbeat, the air thick with my own despair. I was 32 and my family had gutted me. Dad's words, they'd used my credit for years, echoed like a bad dream, relentless and cruel. I sank to the floor, my laptop open on the coffee table, its glow harsh. I pulled up my credit report, my hands shaking, the mouse clicking too loud. The screen glowed, numbers blurring as I scrolled, each one a betrayal. There they were. 3 loans, $15,000, all in my name, opened without my consent. My fingers froze, my breath shallow. Dates stretched back 2 years, each entry a lie. I'd lived unaware. My future, my savings, my name. They'd stolen it all, piece by piece. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to stop the tears, but they came anyway, hot and unstoppable. My phone buzzed. Harper. Her name a flicker of light. I answered, my voice barely a whisper broken. They took loans out in my name. Thousands, Harper. I didn't know. Her voice was fierce, a lifeline through the static. That's fraud, Adeline. You need a lawyer. Now. I nodded, though she couldn't see, my head heavy. I can't think. It's too much. You're stronger than this, she said, her words sharp but warm. They don't get to ruin you. But I felt ruined, hollowed out. My bedroom, usually a haven with its soft quilt, and books, felt like a cage, the walls pressing in. I opened a drawer, pulling out a silver locket Grandma gave me when I turned 16, its surface etched with tiny flowers. Her voice, warm and steady, used to tell me I was enough. Her hands rough from gardening but gentle on mine. Now I wasn't so sure. I clutched at the metal, cool against my skin, and sobbed, the sound raw in the quiet. Every sacrifice, working weekends, skipping dreams to help them, had been a lie, a one-way street. My mind spiraled to a memory, Mom praising Caleb's half-finished projects, her smile wide while I sat quietly, my straight-A report card ignored, tucked under a stack of bills. I'd thought it was normal that love meant giving more, always more. Now I saw the truth. They'd never seen me, only what I could do for them, a resource to tap. My phone lit up again, a text from Mom. You're breaking your father's heart. Stop this nonsense. Nonsense. My anger flared, then fizzled into despair. A heavy fog. I checked the credit report again, hoping I'd misread, that it was a mistake. I hadn't. The numbers stared back, cold and final, unyielding. I thought of calling Dad, demanding answers, but what was the point? They'd already shown who they were. Their choices laid bare. Harper's words, get a lawyer, hung in the air, a faint spark. But I couldn't move. My strength was gone, drained by their betrayal. I curled up on the floor, the locket pressed to my chest, its edges digging into my skin, and let the weight of it all bury me. There was no way out. Not yet. The morning after I saw those loans, my apartment was too quiet. The air heavy with my own defeat. I was 32, curled up on the floor all night, Grandma's locket still in my hand, its clasp a small comfort. But Harper's voice, "You're stronger than this," kept nagging at me, a persistent echo. I couldn't stay broken, not forever. I dragged myself to the kitchen, made coffee, the machine hissing as it brewed, and opened my laptop. My credit report stared back, those $15,000 in fraudulent loans, like a slap, each number a reminder of their betrayal. I wasn't letting them win. Not anymore. I started at the bank, my hands sweaty as I walked through the glass doors, the morning light glinting off the polished floor. The lobby buzzed with tellers and ringing phones, a hum of normalcy I envied. I approached a counter, my voice low but firm, each word a step forward. I need to freeze my credit and open a new savings account. Now. The teller, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag reading Joyce, nodded, her fingers quick on the keyboard. Let's get that set up. Everything okay? I hesitated, my throat tight, then said, just protecting myself. She smiled like she understood more than I'd said, and handed me forms, the paper crisp. As I signed, my chest loosened just a fraction, like a knot untying. This was mine. My money, my future, my choice. I transferred every penny from my old account, the one Dad knew about, to the new one, each click a small rebellion. Joyce's quiet encouragement felt like a lifeline, a reminder that strangers could care when family didn't. Her voice soft as she confirmed the transfer. Next, I found a lawyer. Rachel's office was a small, cluttered space downtown, papers stacked high, a faint smell of ink and coffee. She was sharp, her handshake firm, her eyes steady as I spilled everything, the loans, Dad's email, Caleb's, shrugged the notebook's damning pages. My voice cracked, but I kept going, the words pouring out. They used my name. I said, my hands clenched. I need to fight this. Rachel leaned forward, her pen tapping, her focus unwavering. This is fraud, Adeline. We can dispute these loans, but it'll take time. You're doing the right thing. Her confidence steadied me, a rock in the storm. She outlined the process, filing claims, gathering evidence, building a case. I nodded, my resolve growing, a fire kindling inside. I have the email, I said, pulling it up on my phone. And a notebook I found. It's enough, right? It's a start, she said, scanning the screen. Keep everything. We'll build a case piece by piece. I left her office lighter, the city's noise wrapping around me, horns and chatter, a distant hum. But my phone buzzed Dad. I braced myself, my thumb hesitating, then answered. Adeline, what's this about freezing accounts? He barked, his voice sharp through the static. You're abandoning us. My heart raced, but I held firm, my voice steady. I'm protecting myself. You crossed a line. He cursed, his voice, venomous, dripping with disdain. You'll regret this. We're your family. I hung up my hands, shaking but my mind clear, the city's pulse matching my own. Back home, I sat at my desk, Rachel's business card beside me, its edges crisp. I started typing a list, every loan, every date, every lie, the words flowing like a confession. My fingers moved faster, anger fueling me, a strength I hadn't known I had. I wasn't their pawn anymore. For the first time, I felt a spark of power, like I could take back what they'd stolen. I wasn't done yet. The city's hum faded as I stepped into a small café, my laptop bag heavy with Rachel's paperwork, its weight grounding me. I was 32, and for the first time I wasn't running from my family's mess. I'd arranged to meet Mom, Dad, and Caleb here, a neutral space with wooden tables and the scent of fresh bread, warm and yeasty. My hands steadied as I chose a corner booth, the window cool against my shoulder, the glass fogging slightly from my breath. I wasn't here to beg. I was here to draw a line, to stand firm. They arrived together, Dad's jaw tight, his steps heavy. Mom's eyes were red, her hands clutching her purse. Caleb slouched behind his hoodie, frayed at the cuffs. I stood as they sat, my voice calm but unyielding, each word deliberate. I know about the loans. I've frozen my credit, hired a lawyer. I have proof, your email, Dad's notebook. This stops now. Dad's face darkened, his hands balling into fists. You're blowing this out of proportion, Adeline. We were helping Caleb. By stealing from me, I slid a printed copy of the email across the table, its edges creased from my grip. This isn't help. It's fraud. Mom's hands shook as she read it, her voice a whisper, barely audible. We didn't mean to hurt you. Caleb needed us. I looked at Caleb, his eyes on the floor, avoiding mine. Did you know they used my name? I asked, my voice steady but sharp. He shrugged, muttering, his voice low. You always come out fine. My chest tightened, a fist closing around my heart. I pressed on, my words cutting. Not this time. I'm disputing every loan. You'll answer for this. Dad stood his chair, scraping, the sound jarring in the quiet cafe. You're tearing this family apart. You think you're better than us? No, I said, meeting his gaze, my eyes burning. I just know I'm worth more than your schemes. Mom sobbed, reaching for me, her fingers trembling. Adeline, please, forgive us. We'll fix it. I stepped back, my throat tight, my voice soft but firm. I forgive you, Mom, but I need space. I can't trust you right now. Caleb stormed out, slamming the door, the glass rattling. Dad followed, cursing under his breath, his steps heavy. Mom stayed, her tears falling, but I couldn't comfort her, not anymore. I paid for my untouched tea, the coins clinking in my hand, and left the cafe's warmth fading behind me. Outside, Harper waited in her car, her smile soft, her presence steady. You did it, she said as I slid in. How do you feel? I exhaled, the weight lifting just enough, like a crack letting light through. Free. But it hurts. She nodded, her eyes kind, and shared a story of setting boundaries with her own sister, how it stung but set her free. It gets easier, she said. You're not alone. Back home, I sat on my balcony, the city lights flickering below, a mosaic of lives moving on. My hands rested on the railing, steady now, the metal cold under my fingers. I'd faced them, named their lies, and walked away. The pain was still there, raw and sharp, a wound not yet healed. But it wasn't all I was. I turned back inside my eyes, catching the empty space where family photos used to sit, the wall bare but honest. I didn't need them anymore. I closed the door softly, the click loud in the quiet, and knew I'd chosen myself. 2 weeks after the café, my apartment felt like mine again, its corners softer, less haunted. I was 32, tidying up boxing old trinkets to sell each one a piece of a past I was letting go. Rachel, my lawyer, called with news the fraudulent loans were under review, the process slow but moving. A settlement was possible. Dad and Caleb would repay, and my credit would clear. Relief hit sharp and sudden, but it was bittersweet, tinged with loss. To cover legal fees, I listed Mom's old china set online, each plate a memory of Sunday dinners, laughter over pie now faded. My finger hovered over the locket, Grandma's gift, its silver warm from my touch, but I kept it its weight, a quiet anchor in my hand. The courtroom was cold, all polished wood and hushed voices, the air heavy with formality. Rachel stood beside me, her briefcase sharp against her suit, her presence steadying. The judge reviewed our evidence. Dad's email, the notebook, my credit report, each document a brick in my defense. Dad sat across the room, his face stone, his tie knotted too tight. Caleb slouched beside him, his eyes on the floor, avoiding mine. They didn't look at me, their silence louder than any argument. The judge's voice was flat, assigning repayment terms, a legal line drawn. My name was cleared, but the silence from them cut deeper than any ruling, a wound no court could heal. Back home, my phone lit up a text from Caleb. "You happy now? You ruined me." My thumb hovered over the block button, my heart heavy but resolute. He'd never owned his part, not once. His words always blaming, never reflecting. I blocked him, the action final, like closing a book. The victory felt hollow. I'd won my freedom but lost my brother, the boy who once shared my secrets. Marcus, my coworker, stopped by with takeout, sensing my mood. His knock gentle. Over fried rice, he shared how he'd rebuilt after his family's debts dragged him down, his voice steady, his story a mirror. "You're not alone," he said, passing me a soda. I nodded, but the ache lingered, a bruise under my skin. I listed more heirlooms, a silver candlestick, a quilt Mom loved, its stitches fraying like our bond. Each sale was a cut severing ties I'd once cherished, the money a small buffer for my future. My apartment grew barer, but my bank account steadied each deposit, a step toward safety. I stood in the empty living room, the walls echoing with what used to be the space, both free and lonely. The world kept moving, cars honked, outside neighbors laughed, but I was stuck, caught between relief and grief, a tightrope. I walked alone. They'd repay the loans, but who'd repay the years I'd given them? The question hung unanswered as I stared at the locket, its clasp worn but firm, a small piece of who I'd been. I walked through the park near my apartment, the gravel crunching under my sneakers. Each step a small defiance. I was 32, and the world felt quieter after the courtroom, the air less heavy. The trees were bare, their branches stark against the pale sky like veins against skin. My phone stayed silent. No more texts from Caleb, no calls from Dad. Their absence both a relief and a wound. Then Mom showed up at my door, unannounced, her coat buttoned wrong, her hair loose and uncombed. Her eyes were puffy, her voice small, trembling. "Adeline, I'm sorry," she said, stepping inside her shoes, scuffing my floor. "I went along with your father to keep the peace." I stood by the counter, my hands still the wood, cool under my fingers. "Peace," I said softly, my voice steady but cold. "You let them use me." She flinched, her fingers twisting her scarf, the fabric fraying at the edges. "I thought we were helping Caleb. I didn't see you hurting." Her words landed like stones, heavy and sharp. Didn't see me. I'd spent years trying to be seen, my efforts invisible to her. I poured her tea, the steam rising between us, the kettle's whistle a faint echo, but I didn't sit. "I needed you to choose me, Mom. Just once." She looked away, her silence louder than any excuse, her eyes fixed on the floor. I thought of the times I'd run to her as a kid, her hugs fixing everything, her perfume a comfort. Now she was a stranger in my kitchen, her presence both familiar and foreign. Later, Aunt Clara called, her voice warm but firm, a beacon in the fog. "I told your father I'm done with him," she said. "You're not alone, Adeline." Her words were a lifeline. but they couldn't fill the gap, the hollow where family used to be. At the park again, I watched a kid drop a toy truck, its wheels spinning, his mother rushing to help her laugh soft. My throat tightened, a pang of memory. I'd been that kid trusting someone would pick me up, my hands reaching for hers. Now relatives whispered I was greedy, their voices reaching me through distant cousins, their words sharp but distant. I kept walking, the wind sharp on my face, stinging my eyes. Mom's visit, Clara's call, the rumors, they were ripples from my stand. But they left me colder, more alone. I sat on a bench, the wood damp, and stared at the empty path, the horizon blurring. I'd won my name back, but the family I'd fought for was gone, and the loss settled in my bones, heavy and final, like a door closing forever. I moved into a smaller apartment, one with a tiny balcony and walls. I could paint myself, the plaster fresh and waiting. At 32, I was starting over, and it felt right, like shedding an old skin. The boxes were unpacked, and I hung a canvas I'd painted, a swirl of blues and greens, inspired by the garden Grandma used to tend its flowers, vivid in my memory. I'd started teaching art classes on weekends, a side hustle that lit something in me, a spark I hadn't felt in years. The kids' laughter, their messy brushes dipping into bright paints, reminded me of simpler days of summers spent sketching in the grass. Tonight I invited Harper and Marcus over for dinner, my kitchen warm with the smell of roasted vegetables, the oven's heat a quiet comfort. We sat around a second-hand table, candles flickering in jars, their light dancing on the walls. Harper raised her glass, her grin wide, her eyes bright. To Adeline, who took her life back, I smiled, the warmth spreading through me, a glow I could trust. To friends who don't let you fall. Marcus chuckled, sharing a story about his first painting, a lopsided tree that made his mom cry with pride, her tears a memory he cherished. Their voices wrapped around me, a new kind of family, one built on choice, not obligation. After they left, I found a letter from Mom slipped under my door, her handwriting shaky, the envelope creased. She wanted to talk, to rebuild, her words, tentative but hopeful. My heart tugged, a faint pull, but I set it aside, the paper heavy in my hand. I wasn't ready, not yet. Alone, I stepped onto the balcony, the night air cool, carrying the scent of rain. The city hummed below, alive and distant, its lights a constellation of other lives. I thought of the years I'd spent chasing my family's approval, how I dimmed myself to fit their mold, my dreams tucked away. Teaching art. Laughing with friends, it was like waking up, like seeing color after gray. I wasn't whole yet, but I was mine, my own anchor. I leaned against the railing, my breath steady, the metal cool under my palms, and let the quiet settle. For the first time, I didn't need to run. The next morning, I walked to a lake near my apartment, a journal tucked under my arm, its pages soft from use. I was 32, and the water was still reflecting the soft gray of dawn, the surface unbroken. I settled on a bench, the wood smooth from years of visitors, its grain worn by time. My pen moved slowly, tracing the jagged path of the last few months, the loans, the lies, the way I'd stood up and walked away. Each word felt like a stone lifted from my chest, lightening me. I wasn't angry anymore, just clear, my thoughts sharp and true. A family of ducks glided by, the smallest one trailing behind its paddle, determined, its tiny body cutting through the water. I smiled, seeing myself in its stubborn effort, its quiet fight. I thought of Grandma, how she'd sit me on her porch and say, "You don't need their love to shine," her voice steady, her eyes bright with belief. I'd gone to her grave last week, the grass soft under my knees, the air heavy with earth and memory, and thanked her, my words a whisper to the wind. Her belief in me was enough then, and it was enough now, a light I carried. My phone buzzed, a cousin, her voice kind but heavy with expectation, asking me to fix the family rift, to bridge the gap I hadn't made. "I can't," I said gently, my voice firm, and hung up the call, ending with a soft click. I didn't owe them my peace, not anymore. I closed my journal, the pages full, their weight a comfort. I stood the lake rippling, catching the first light, a shimmer of possibility. I'd been running from their shadows, but here in this quiet, I was free. I walked home, my steps slow, the world soft around me, the air clean. I didn't need to look back. A year later, my apartment was a small haven filled with my own colors, warm ochre walls, shelves of thrift store books, their spines cracked from use. I was 33 now, and life felt softer, like a well-worn sweater, comfortable and mine. I'd kept up the art classes, my evenings alive with students mixing paints and sharing stories, their voices a chorus of hope. Tonight I hosted a small show in a local gallery, my canvases on display, each one a piece of my heart. Harper Marcus and Aunt Clara mingled with strangers, their laughter blending with the clink of glasses, the room warm with life. I stood by a painting called Roots Its Bold Strokes, a map of where I'd been, its colors deep and unapologetic. A woman bought it, her smile genuine, her eyes searching mine. "This speaks to me," she said, "like you've been through something." I nodded, my throat tight, the words heavy. "I have." Later, Mom slipped in, hesitant, her coat clutched tight, its buttons mismatched. We hadn't spoken much, just careful texts over months, small steps toward something new. She looked at my work, her eyes soft, tracing the lines of my paintings. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly, her voice catching. I took her hand, my voice steady, warm. "Thanks. Let's take it slow, okay?" She nodded, tears brimming her fingers, squeezing mine. We talked not about the past, but about small things, her garden blooming again, my classes, the kids' messy joy. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a fragile bridge. As guests left, I caught Marcus helping a kid hang a drawing, his patience a quiet gift, his hands steady. Harper pulled me aside, her grin fierce, her eyes bright. "You built this, Adeline. All of it." I looked around the gallery, my friends, Mom's tentative presence. I'd lost so much, but I'd found more, a life I'd carved myself. I stepped outside, the night air crisp, carrying the scent of wet pavement. I leaned against the brick wall, its texture rough under my fingers. The stars were faint, but they were there, steady above the city's glow. I breathed deep, my heart full, and felt the weight of the old wounds ease like a tide going out, leaving room for something new. Back inside, I tidied the gallery, stacking chairs in the quiet, their clatter soft in the empty space. I was 33, and the hum of the evening lingered, a gentle pulse in my chest, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. Alone now, I sat on a stool, a blank canvas before me, its surface clean and waiting. My brush dipped into crimson, moving without plan, each stroke a release, a breath. I hadn't known I was holding. I thought of the years I'd spent carrying my family's weight, believing love meant giving, until I was empty, my own dreams buried under their needs. I'd learned something different now. Love starts with yourself. It's not loud or selfish. It's the quiet choice to stand tall, to say no when it matters, and to build a life that's yours, stitch by stitch. I used to think family was a debt I had to pay, that my worth came from what I gave them, my sacrifices a currency of love. But worth isn't earned through sacrifice. It's there, always waiting for you to claim it, like a seed waiting for light. I forgave Mom, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace, a life unburdened by their shadows. Caleb and Dad were shadows now, their choices, their own, their voices distant. I didn't need their approval to shine, not anymore. My canvas filled with color, reds, golds, a hint of blue. Each hue a step toward the woman I was becoming, each stroke a promise to myself. Aunt Clara's story. From the night echoed, she'd walked away from Dad's control, found her own path, her courage a quiet fire. Her story mirrored mine, a reminder that we all carry scars, but we can choose how they shape us, whether they weigh us down or lift us higher. I set my brush down the painting, unfinished but alive, its edges raw but honest. It didn't need to be perfect. Neither did I. I stepped back, my hands steady, my breath even, and knew I was enough. What moment made you realize your own worth? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated, please like, subscribe, and share to spread this journey of healing. Thank you for listening, for being here. May you find your own light, and may it guide you home.